Archaeologist, philosopher, bonsai aficionado, author, black belt, and squanderer of over 50,000 hours watching B-movies. He uses this wealth of useless knowledge to bring you classic movie reviews with snark and world-famous short summaries. Now broadcasting from beautiful downtown Tallahassee, it's Classic Movie Reviews with Snark.
Welcome to today's show. My name is John. As always, you can subscribe to the show on iTunes or follow the links to social media in the podcast show notes. You can also go to snarkymoviereviews.com to read notes, bios, and other random movie thoughts. I'm very excited to get to The Mummy 1932. When I watched this for the show, I found that Boris Karloff is still scary as Ardath Bey with his deadpan or dead fish stares and wrinkled skin. So I'll jump right in with Boris Karloff. Boris Karloff, the king of the movie monsters, played a dual role, or three depending on how you count. In this movie, he was the living Imhotep, the dead Imhotep, aka the Mummy, and Ardath Bey, the mummy in his second life. I covered Karloff pretty well in episode 9, Son of Frankenstein, 1939, so I won't go into any more detail now. Zita Johann played the love interest Helen Grosvenor. She was apparently a big deal in Hollywood, but I didn't see it from this role. She had a very expressive face that seemed to be a holdover from the silent film days. Johann was born in 1904 in Austria-Hungary, in what is now Romania. Her family moved to New York City when she was 7. In high school, she began acting. When she later applied to the Theater Guild, she immediately started getting leading roles. She obtained her first Broadway role in 1924. In all, she was in only 8 movies. The first of these was The Struggle, 1931. This was the last film directed by D.W. Griffith. This film was followed by Tiger Shark 1932 and The Mummy 1932. Johann also worked on Broadway between movies. Johann was active during the war years with soldier relief projects. She died in upstate New York in 1993 at the age of 89. David Manners played the role of Frank Wimple. Manners was from a well-to-do Canadian family. Manners was discovered by director Frank Whale of Frankenstein fame. His first film was Journey's End, 1930. In all, he made 39 films starring with the biggest stars of the time. Manners became bored or upset, depending on who you ask, with film and walked away. He occasionally did theater, but mostly he painted and wrote. He died in 1988 in California. Arthur Byron played the role of Sir Joseph Wimple. Byron was born in 1872 in New York. I'm seeing a trend. Byron began in film later in life. His first film was Fast Life, 1932, and was followed the same year with The Mummy, 1932. Of the 26 movies he was in, quite a few are very good. These films include The Prisoner of Shark Island, 1936, 20,000 Years in Sing Sing, 1932, The Mayor of Hell, 1933, where he was cast as Judge Gilbert, playing opposite James Cagney. His last film was The Prisoner of Zenda, 1937. He died in 1943 in Hollywood. Edward Van Sloan played Dr. Mueller, professor of occult knowledge. I used to laugh at Van Sloan when he was fighting the Lord of the Dead in Dracula 1931. The joke was, could they find an older guy to fight creatures of the night? However, that was in my foolish youth, long before I discovered that the Coke bottle glasses wearing quinquenarian faced down 3 of the 4 major monsters in his film roles. Van Sloan was Professor Van Helsing in Dracula 1931, Dr. Waldman in Frankenstein, but the monster won that time, and Dr. Mueller in The Mummy 1932. He never faced off with the Wolfman. Van Sloan was born in Minnesota in 1910. By 1927, he was in the role of Van Helsing on Broadway with Bela Lugosi. When he was cast in the movie version, he and Dwight Frye became the only actors to be in both Dracula 1931 and Frankenstein 1931. In all, Van Sloan had 88 credits. He was active in all genres. He played Professor Von Helsing in Dracula's Daughter 1936. His last movie was in 1950, and he died in 1964 in California. Another actor that we touched on in episode 1, King Kong 1933, was Noble Johnson, who played the native chief in Kong. In this film, he is known only as the Nubian. Leonard Moody played the role of Professor Pearson. Moody was born in England in 1883. By 1908, he was doing stage work. By 1914, he was acting on Broadway. In 1921, he went to Hollywood, where he made 2 silent films before returning to Broadway. With the advent of sound, Moody returned to Hollywood. In all, he had over 150 credits. He played the hanging judge with Errol Flynn in Captain Blood, 1935, and the chief alien inquisitor in The Story of Mankind, 1957, in which I believe Vincent Price played the devil. However, most of Moody's roles were smaller. Before the end of his career, Moody got into television and even did a Star Trek episode. His last film was released in 1965, and he died that same year at the age of 82. Bramwell Fletcher had the small role of Ralph Norton. During this brief time, he was able to show everything you should not do as an archaeological assistant. Fletcher was born in England in 1904. Fletcher was in Svengoolie, 1931, with John Barrymore. He later married Barrymore's daughter, Diana. The other movies include The Mummy, 1932, The Monkey's Paw, 1933, The Scarlet Pimpernel, 1944, and Random Harvest, 1942. Fletcher was married 4 times. His last wife was Helen Chandler, the woman that played Mina Harker in Dracula 1931 and later drank herself to death. Fletcher died in 1988. Henry Victor was credited as the Saxon warrior, but all his scenes were cut before release. Universal Studio head Carl Laemmle Jr. got the idea for The Mummy 1932 because of all the publicity created when Howard Carter opened the tomb of Tutankhamun, better known as King Tut, in 1922. Immediately following the excavation, there were stories of a curse associated with the act. I will speak about this in just a bit. Unlike Dracula and Frankenstein, there wasn't a novel on which to base The Mummy. There was an earlier version of The Mummy, 1911, which had reanimated mummies. The original treatment script for this movie was titled Cagliostro, and based on a man said to be 3,500 years old through the use of nitrate injections and who killed women that looked like his betraying lover. The story was approved and passed to writer John Balderston, who changed the setting from San Francisco to Egypt and made it mummies. To quote Frank Miller, it was Universal and writer John Balderston who created the idea of a reanimated mummy trying to bring back the woman of his dreams. Balderston also did some clever things with names. He named the mummy Imhotep, which means he who comes in peace, and was the name of an Egyptian Da Vinci type from the 27th century BC. His reanimated name was Ardith Bey, which is an anagram for death by Ra. Karloff was put through the paces in Frankenstein 1931 by makeup artist Jack Pierce with his green skin and 8-pound shoes. However, this was easy compared to what he had to go through for this film. It took 8 hours to apply the full mummy effect. The process that Jack Pierce applied was, quote, layers of fuller's earth, beauty clay, the same clay used to remove wrinkles on women, cotton soaked in collodon, and 150 feet of rotted linen bandages to his body. When Karloff was Ardith Bey, he only had to sit for a few hours each day while cotton strips were applied to his hands and his face to make the wrinkled effect. So, back to the curse. As an archaeologist, I'm pretty familiar with King Tut's curse. But what I found out is this is part of a larger group called the Curse of the Pharaohs. The curse is said to affect anyone that disturbs a mummy, but you get an extra curse for disturbing a pharaoh. As you may or may not know, the ancient Egyptians were very fond of mummification and often did it on cats, monkeys, baboons, or whatever else they could get their hands on. I would pay to see the curse of the baboon monkey. I think I'll start on the script tonight. In reality, there were very few hieroglyphic inscriptions that were curses, although they did exist. However, most of the curses are located in 19th century or later literature, such as the mummy curse in Louisa May Alcott's 1869 story, Lost in a Pyramid, or The Mummy's Curse. When Howard Carter opened the tomb of Tutankhamun, he sent a messenger to his house. When the man arrived, he found that a cobra had eaten Carter's canary. Of course, the cobra is the symbol of the Egyptian royalty, and it is the image worn on the pharaoh's crown. This started the whole curse idea. When Lord Kavanaugh died of blood poisoning 6 weeks after the opening of the tomb, it was on. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle added flames to the fire, saying it was a curse. Carter was not concerned about the curse, even keeping a severed mummy hand in his office. Carter died in 1939 at the age of 64, and the last person to die from the curse passed in 1961, 39 years after the event. This is the worst curse ever. Story. The movie begins by showing the scroll of Thoth. Thoth is the Egyptian god of knowledge, and the scroll shows the spell that Isis used to raise Osiris from the dead. It switches to night in an archaeological field laboratory. The year is 1921, and Sir Joseph Wimple, Arthur Byron, is trying to teach his idiot assistant Ralph Norton, Bramwell Fletcher, how to do some archaeology the right way. You can't be jumping around to the goodies. You've got the catalog in order. Wimple gives this great quote that sums up the archaeological field.
Trying to teach me a lesson in patience, Sir Joseph?
Method is everything in archaeology, my boy. We always deal with our finds of the day in order.
Well, it seems to me that box we dug up today with the very peculiar gentleman over there is the only find we've made in the past 2 months that'll bring this expedition any medals from the British Museum.
We didn't come to dig in Egypt for medals. Much more is learned from studying bits of broken pottery than from all the sensational finds. Our job is to increase the sum of human knowledge of the past, not to satisfy our own curiosity.
Wimple's friend, Dr. Mueller, Edward Van Sloan, professor of occult studies, is there as well. Mueller examines the mummy and states that the mummy was buried alive and the hieroglyphics that would help him reach the other world were scratched off. He also translates the name of the mummy as Imhotep, chief priest. The idiot is hopping from foot to foot, so Wimple agrees to open the box that accompanied the mummy's sarcophagus. Inside of this wooden box is a golden box that has an unbroken seal. They pause for a second and then rip the seal off. No photographs. There is a nasty curse on the lid for anyone that disturbs the mummy. Inside is the scroll of Thoth. Mueller insists the mummy in the box be reburied, and the two older men walk out into the night to discuss the problem, leaving the idiot inside alone. So Idiot gets the scroll and reads the spell aloud. The mummy, Boris Karloff, slowly begins to move and starts heading for the door. Idiot sees him and goes insane, laughing until he finally dies. The mummy slips past the two men outside, carrying the scroll of Thoth. The movie jumps forward to 1931. Shouldn't Indiana Jones be running around there about this time?
Belloc staff is too long. They're digging in the wrong place.
With the idiot dead and the mummy missing, Sir Joseph Wimple refuses to return to Egypt. Wimple's son Frank, David Manners, and Professor Pearson, Leonard Moody, are now excavating the site. Their expedition is a bust until a strange man by the name of Ardith Bey, Boris Karloff, arrives and tells them the location of the burial of female Ankhesemen's tomb is located.
Your expedition has not been a success.
Scarcely. Here are the season's finds.
Permit me to present you with the most sensational find since that of Tutankhamun.
This is very sporting of you. May I ask why?
We Egyptians are not permitted to dig up our ancient dead. Only foreign museums.
I am somewhat interested, and they don't explain why it took 10 years. In later mummy movies, he had to build up his power. Was something like that going on? Maybe it took him that long to find her burial. Anyway, they dig up the burial tomb and recover the sarcophagus of Ankhesemen. The archaeologists turn everything over to the Cairo Museum in what at the time was a very enlightened move. Back in Cairo, Ardith Bey is hanging around the museum, burning incense and staying overnight in the locked building. Sir Wimple has returned from England to work on the finds. Dr. Mueller is at a dance with Helen Grosvenor, Zita Johann. She is half English and half Egyptian. When Frank sees her, he falls fast for her good looks. Ardith Bey is chanting the name of Ankhesemen by the mummy, and Helen falls into a trance and travels to the museum. Wimple and his son Frank find her beating on the door of the museum. When she faints, they take her back to the Wimple house, where she keeps saying, Imhotep, Imhotep. That night, a guard at the museum is killed by Ardith Bey, but manages to get the scroll away from him. Dr. Mueller finds out that Helen is at the Wimple house. Mueller convinces Wimple to burn the scroll. Ardith Bey takes mind control over the Nubian servant, Noble Johnson. When Ardith goes to the house, sees Helen, he thinks she looks like the long-dead princess. Frank takes Helen back to her hotel.
Let me put this here. It'll be more comfortable.
Thanks.
You really want to know why I didn't take you to the hospital?
Because when I held you in my arms...
Hadn't you better not commit yourself? What girl could fail to make a conquest or collapse at a man's feet in the moonlight?
Oh, I know it seems absurd when we've known each other such a short time. But I'm serious.
Don't you think I've had enough excitement for one evening without the additional thrill of a strange man making love to me?
But I've never been serious about this sort of thing before. Now, look here. You can tell me to go to the devil, but you can't laugh at me.
Wimple and Mueller question Ardith. Ardith comes clean on being a Walking Dead mummy.
I have something else to show you. Photograph.
Why do you show all this to me?
Do you think it conceivable that the mummy was not stolen, but restored to a semblance of life by the spell from the scroll of...
That scroll is my property. I bought it from a dealer. It is here in this house. I presume in that room. Never.
We had foreseen this. The scroll is in safe hands, and will be destroyed the minute it is known that harm has come to us.
You have studied our ancient arts, and you know that you cannot harm me. You also know that you must return that scroll to me or die.
Ardith Bay goes to his hot tub, which gives him a television view of Wimple. Ardith kills him with magic before he can burn the scroll. The Nubian retrieves the scroll and takes it to Bay. Mueller finds out that the scroll has not been destroyed. Mueller and Frank head to Helen's house, but Ardith Bay has summoned her and her dog. The Nubian is at Ardith's house. He takes Helen's dog. Ardith uses his hot tub television to show Helen that he was buried alive for trying to raise her from the dead thousands of years before as Princess Oxysaman.
Thy father condemned me to the nameless death. The scroll he ordered buried with me, that no such sacrilege might disgrace Egypt again. A nameless grave. The slaves were killed so that none should know. The soldiers who killed them were also slain. So no friend could creep to the desert with funeral offerings for my condemned spirit.
After a little history lesson, Helen realizes that he wants to kill her, mummify her, and bring her back to life where she will be his bride. Helen returns to her room without the dog, and Frank gives her the 3rd degree. She remembers that a white cat, the goddess Bast, has killed the dog. She realizes she is going to be killed, and she doesn't want any. Mueller tells Helen to go to Ardith next time he calls. They plan on following her and killing the mummy. Ardith attacks Frank with his hot tub, and Helen escapes unfollowed. Ardith and Helen go to the museum to finish the ceremony. He tells her she will have to die. Nope, ain't gonna happen.
The ancient rites must be performed over thy body. Then I will read the great spell with which Isis brought Osiris back from the grave. And thou shalt rise again.
No. No, I'm alive. I'm young. I won't die. I loved you once, but now you belong with the dead.
He destroys Helen's mummy body, and she gets scared. Helen starts to remember her past. Mueller finds Frank, and they head to the museum. When they bust in, Ardith is distracted. Helen prays to the goddess Isis to save her.
Oh, Isis, holy maiden, I was thy consecrated vestal. I broke my vows. Save me now. Teach me the ancient summons, the holy spells I've forgotten. I call upon thee as of old.
The statue of Isis raises its arm and shoots a laser beam at the scroll. When the scroll starts to burn, Ardith Bay, the mummy, Imhotep, turns to dust. Dr. Mueller urges Frank to call Helen back to the real world. As the scroll burns, she returns to normal. I have assembled a little list of movies by Universal, Hammer, and others that followed the Mummy's line. They are The Mummy's Hand, 1940, The Mummy's Tomb, 1942, The Mummy's Ghost, 1944, The Mummy's Curse, 1944, Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, 1955, The Mummy, 1959, The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, 1964, The Mummy's Shroud, 1966, Blood from the Mummy's Tomb, 1971, The Mummy, 1999, The Mummy Returns, 2001, The Scorpion King, 2002, The Scorpion King 2, Rise of a Warrior, 2008, The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, 2008, and The Scorpion King 3, Battle for Redemption, 2012. One day I hope to review all of these movies and place them under a mummy theme. I also have a list coming out very soon that ranks the top 30 movies with archaeologists or anthropologists, so look for that on the site. World famous short summary: older man gets a little stalky. If you enjoyed this week's show, please tell your friends, and if you really want to help, drop over to iTunes and give me a review. If you want to comment, recommend a movie, or just say hi, follow the links in the show note to my site. I have SpeakPipe so you can leave audio feedback as well. Beware the Moors.